since law enforcement considers the southern border to be the gateway. Arizona has unfortunately had a front row seat to the opioid crisis and the wave of fentanyl pouring into the country. Last year, however, Governor Ducey signed a bill legalizing fentanyl testing strips that can detect synthetic opioids in drugs. The Department of Health Services tells me a $100,000 is being distributed. And Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum demonstrates how this has finally happened. Fentanyl test strips were delivered to numerous participating counties prior to legalization thanks in large part to a federal opioids funding. Test strips were seen as drug paraphernalia. Yet their function is to prevent overdoses and save the lives of people who use foreign music. I overdosed on fentanyl on September 2nd, 2017. And when my parents arrived at the hospital, they were informed that they couldn't keep his heart beating and didn't know what he had taken. And that they should get his affairs and orders in order because it didn't look good. Former football player Nick Baker, who admits to relying on painkillers, used heroin laced with fentanyl and developed a drug and alcohol addiction. I had met my match and was defeated. But I was so disconnected from reality at that point that all I knew to do was try to flee from this emotion and feeling as quickly as I could. As a result, 24 hours after being released from the hospital and after emerging from a week-long coma, I was back to using drugs. I stopped looking for that as my solution drugs alcohol when I found true purpose for my pain. How effective is fentanyl? 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. Illegally manufactured fentanyl falls under the category of synthetic opioids. The DEA says 2 milligrams is considered a lethal dose depending on one's BP. How Nick started an up and down months-long journey to sobriety, moving from Massachusetts to Arizona, where his life changed and he eventually got clean. Here in Arizona, synthetic opioid overdose deaths rose from just over 1,500 to nearly 1,800. But 65% of the deaths occurred in Maricopa County over those 2 years. So this year, we're already at over 1,200 pounds of fentanyl seeds. Synthetic opioid overdose deaths in the U.S. increased 23%, reaching more than 70,000. The 1,200 plus pounds of fentanyl confiscated by troopers through September have already eclipsed the 830 pounds of fentanyl seized throughout 2018. According to Arizona DPS Sergeant Jesus Castellum, frequent traffic stops result in heaps of fentanyl tablets stashed in backpacks, suitcases, or behind car parts. The greater their numbers, the more often we see them, whether on the I-10 in the Tucson, Casa Grande, or nearby areas. Castellum claims that the majority of the narcotics entering the country come from Mexico, and that Arizona is not their only destination. Instead, they may be traveling to Phoenix from the border, Colorado, Chicago, or anywhere else, despite the department's sworn personnel being over 300 short, the biggest shortage since 2018. DPS is seizing more fentanyl than ever. People who regularly use recreational drugs like cocaine, Xanax, or Percocet can be warned that if they are absolutely unfamiliar with opiates, they will become unresponsive and die after just one dose. A simple cheek swab can achieve this. Nick now works with the Eris Foundation, a charity that aids the homeless. The work begins in this warehouse, and on Tuesday nights, his team will distribute clothing, toiletries, and other resources. However, Nick is also attempting to keep homeless people alive by dispensing Narcan and fentanyl test strips. While Narcan reverses opioid overdoses, fentanyl test strips concentrate on fentanyl and can detect contamination in the substance so one doesn't accidentally take it. You pop the top, drop it on this, and this will indicate whether the test is positive or negative. If we don't use those resources, the problem will only get worse. The fentanyl test strip is demonstrated to us at Sonic Test Labs, and in just minutes, we are able to determine that this sample of oxycodone is fentanyl. Nick has been collaborating with the state's Department of Health Services to obtain batches of fentanyl test strips on a consistent basis, to keep those struggling with addiction alive so he may make a life-changing connection. Nick keeps asking for additional fentanyl test strips and Narcan. So far, the state has provided FTS to 6 counties. Nick wants to know how to encourage more people to simply have a talk. Pima Coconino Mojave Yavapai and Navajo from Cochise with assistance from the CDC. Maricopa County Public Health is now striving to increase the accessibility of the test strips in this region.